Hey everyone, back with another review, and this time we will be looking at another BlackFencer sword, more precisely the BlackFencer Portuguese sword, or the steel version of it. But first things first, formalities out of the way real quick. So this review will follow the general structure of all our review videos, which means that I will have my talking part first, going over the ordering process, the stats, and just my general impressions from using the sword I'm talking about. Then there will be a picture with the stats again, so that you can just pause and look at those. So more pictures about, just sword from different perspectives, so you can look at that, or things like how do the gloves I own actually fit into the hilt, or things that happened during the review. And then some sparring clips at the end, so you can just see me using the sword and maybe, confirm how I got to the impression and got to the conclusion that I came to in the end. And of course, we will always have some timestamps in the description, so you can jump around and focus on the parts that really interest you the most. Or, jump back and forth if you want. Two things of note. First of all, paid with my own money, paid in full. BlackFencer wasn't aware that there was going to be a review. They might have guessed it, but I didn't tell them at least. And also, arming sword, what this essentially is, medium type one-handed sword, isn't really my main focus of study, or not a focus of study for me, not a field of study at all for me, really. So I am not really an expert on using this type of sword, which, I'll get to that later, was actually why I got it. Okay, so starting with the ordering process. Unremarkable, which is great. Ordered it from the website, paid, I think by wire transfer this time. It was part of a club order when I got it. And received the sword within the limit that they gave of the time they needed working for it. I think at the time it was 10-ish weeks. And yeah, that's that. I never really had a problem with BlackFencer when it came to that, which is great. Stats for the sword. So, this weights in at 1,175-ish grams. The POB is at about 11-ish 0.5 centimeters, roundabout. So, about here, really. The sword overall is 95 centimeters long, front to back. Of that, 10-ish centimeters roundabout is the grip. Then you have the pommel, and the blade is 79 centimeters. The cross goes out to 17.5 centimeters wide. It's about 2 centimeters at the grip, and then it slims out to 1 centimeter and 0.6 at the very ends. The double nagel, what it essentially is, goes out to 3.7 centimeters, so it does cover quite a good amount of area, really. The grip, the width of it starts at 3 centimeters and then goes down to 2.2 centimeters. When it comes to the thickness of it, it starts at about 2 centimeters, then it gets a bit thicker, 2.2 centimeters really, and then slims out to 2 again. It's a bit more subtle, but just from the form, it's a really nice grip to hold, I have to say. So the blade, 79 centimeters overall, as I said. When it comes to taper, quite linear. It starts at 4.3 centimeters and then goes down to 3.1, 1.5, and then we have 1 centimeter at the tip. Distal taper, we start at 5 millimeters, then go down to 4 millimeters, 3 millimeters at the thinnest part, and then it thickens out to 5 millimeters for the nice and thickened tip, which is always preferable, as far as I'm concerned. So much for the stats. Handling. As you can probably already get from the stats, just me talking about it, reading them, this is a sword that has a good amount of presence. I wouldn't call it a heavy sword. The weight is fine, but just because of the way the POV behaves, because of the weight, the combination of just, these factors, it does have a good amount of presence in your hand, and it does have a good amount of presence in the bind, which for me is fine. As I said earlier, arming sword isn't something I really do, but I was kind of curious on, for me, for someone who's doing mesa fencing really, how would I fare using one? How would it feel? And that was started by a passage in the Glasgow Fechtbuch, the mesa part of it, which is something that my club focuses on. And you just have a small part where it says, take your sword, and then it's crossed out and it's just mesa written above it, which I always found incredibly charming. I mean, we all make mistakes, really. But it also always had the wheels ticking in the back of my head, just like, if I just didn't have a mesa but just would take a sword, how would it actually feel? And at least for this sword, picking up that sword, I can say it actually really felt quite nice. Because of the weight, because of the POV. Leküchner type mesa fencing, which can very much focus on the bind, winding, controlling, was perfectly fine. The length sometimes made it feel a bit like cheating, because it is longer than the mesas we have in our club, and I'm already a bit taller than the average at about 189 centimeters on a good day, and my arms already aren't exactly short, so it was at times a bit easy to just, when in doubt, Longsword, which Leküchner would have probably been fine with as an approach, but not necessarily the most satisfactory result when it comes to fencing with someone and just having a bit of fun. And also I wanted to not rely on it too heavily. So what I also did, other than just basically fencing mesa type against mesa type with just a different type of sword, is I went ahead and tried this against Longsword. About 3 times, I think. 3 days is when we did that. Now, there is, of course, when you do that, always a risk, depending on the guard construction, because, as you are probably well aware, longswords can just transfer a lot of force. And if your guard is not really, really sturdy, you risk just damaging it. Can just happen. Now, I was aware of that, but because I wanted to force myself more to actually work towards an opening and not just rely on, my heights and the length of my weapon to shoot the Longsword in, I just wanted to do that. Also, I was kind of just like curious on how that would fare. And I wasn't actually, well, I wouldn't say I was successful. I mean, you can see that in the sparring, really. But I have to say I fared better than I feared I would, because of the presence of the blade. Controlling the opponent's blade was actually still an option, really. Parrying, not a problem, I found, really. I fared much better than I feared. There is, of course, with this guard always the option to put the finger over, which gives additional control, which is nice. And just in general, from the construction, I have to say that it really fared quite well. Now, there are, just from the blade contact, there are 2 points in the blade. I don't think it shows it well on video, but I'll put pictures on it, where the nicks are a bit deeper, but perfectly acceptable as far as I'm concerned, and just file them out and you're good. But one thing that happened that is worth noting is that there was a point when I was fencing against an Albion Lichtenauer, and what I wanted to do was just displace the cut and then move in. But I didn't quite go about it in the right way. I don't know if it was just a bad movement or if I was maybe a bit too optimistic, a bit too lazy, maybe a combination of all those things. But what ended up happening is that I was just basically flat on flat, and the cut went right through and right on the most delicate part of the guard. And that did leave the guard bent. Now, I knew the risk going in. I still wasn't exactly happy because my new fancy and, as far as I'm concerned, incredibly pretty sword was damaged. But I am happy to report, as you can see, it didn't break the guard. It got bent out of shape. But with some effort, I was able to repair it and bend it back. And that kind of reminded me of one thing and pointed out another for me, is that for one, we really do expect quite a lot from our swords for training. If it is your main sword, and depending on how often you train, we do expect them to go for sometimes heavy contact multiple times a week, which really, for a good amount of specimens, is probably more than most swords ever had to face, really. And we expect them to just take that and, remain perfectly fine, which runs the danger of resulting in overconstruction because, of course, that in the end people will complain if their swords get damaged too easily and things like that. And what it did point out to me, though, is that this is a well-constructed sword, really. Because, it always felt good picking it up, but the guard serves its function perfectly well. The cut connected, it did get bent out of shape, but the cut never connected to my hand. And I was able to keep on fighting, fencing, at that point for me, and I was able to get it repaired afterwards, which is really perfectly fine. Overall, it highlighted, as I said, to me that this is a well-constructed sword, really. I have heard it in the past that the blade material that BlackFencer uses is too soft, or the guard material. I know they changed their guard material, so I would really say that by now this is not something you really need to worry about. But also just details like the blade being peened into the tang and everything. It's a good, solid feeling sword, really. And I just have to say, from handling it and everything, it does have enough flex, it holds up well, it's fun fencing it. If you are looking for a light sword, a sword that feels light, a sword that you can use for a long time in training and drilling, depending on your level of fitness, this might not necessarily be your sword, really. But if you are looking for something that has presence in the bind and is well constructed, then definitely give these swords from BlackFencer a look. I'm really happy with mine, and I'm gonna keep using it, and I expect I'll have lots of fun with it in the future. Cheers!
habt ja auch wieder ins Schwert gelegt. Ergibst du dich? Ja. Ja. Im falschen Moment. Schön. Schön. Du warst halt trotzdem schon dran, ne? Immer so das Problem. Sorry. War nur ein Kratzer. Da hätte ich mein Schwert aufgeben sollen. Aber wer will das schon? Eben. Ja. Das ist gut. Da war ich mir vom Kontakt an den Brief auf, was ein Treffer war. Kennt das. Parallel. Der Zahlwoche. Hast du schön gemacht. Schön reinmontiert.